Hello and welcome to the fourth and penultimate ARCHLine.XP Interior Design webinar series episode. My name is Zoltán Tóth. Over here is our resident architect, as always, Mr. Illésba.
Hi there.
Let me tell you what you missed if you haven't seen the first three shows yet. So first of all, we looked at how to create a very simple interior design model within ARCHLine. And then we looked at how to create kitchen design elements that mainly meant cabinetry, worktops, and how to get quantity takeoff from these elements. And we also looked at how to design a very simple but quite nice bathroom, which covered tiling styles, and again quantity takeoff. Now we are going to look at, I think, the most spectacular part of the webinar series, and this is going to be about lights, rendering, and other kind of visual tools, which is, I think, essentially what we are working towards to get some kind of very stunning visuals out of this. And that will be another session next Tuesday, which would be about documentation, but now we are going to discuss the more breathtaking and visual things. As always, I urge you to ask your questions on the right-hand side of me in the chat bar, which we are going to answer at the end during a dedicated session. And with these questions, we can make sure that the content will be even more relevant. So just a couple of words about what we are going to talk about today. When it comes to rendering, I think you would agree that the two major factors that would influence how a rendering looks like is the correct light settings and the correct material settings. That being said, we are going to first talk about how to position, how to create lights and light sources, and how to distribute lights. After that, we'll talk about the decorative lighting elements. This would be mostly about LED stripes and 3D lighting or luminous text. And then we talk about rendering and how to prepare the model to make sure that you get the best results. And that will be mostly about the material settings, setting up layers, and the biggest surfaces. And we also talk about the fundamentals of rendering. What are the things that you have to keep an eye on? What are the things that you have to pay attention to? Eventually, we'll show you a couple of, obviously we are going to do a render here, but we are going to show some additional work so you can see what ARCHLine is capable of doing. So I give the word over to you and tell a couple of words about the project, what we see here on the screen.
Well, this project is, just as always, now we use a small project because we don't want to use a large project for this simple example, but whatever we show here works just as fine as on large projects as well. This project is an interior of a shop and it features light sources. You see spotlights on the ceiling. Also, there are a few lighting luminous texts and so on. We will talk about how you can set these up. And actually, the complete workflow that we will cover today is mostly about interior design. But I believe at the end I will have a few seconds to talk some sort of differences about what
how
the interior and the exterior design
differs.
Actually, if you are interested in how you can create visuals for exteriors, there is another session about that. We covered the whole architectural workflow in a previous webinar, and now we are focusing on the interior design aspect of the design.
That's right. So let's take a look around. One thing what I always like to remind our viewers too is that when you are working in a 3D space, it's always good to set up certain viewpoints, perspectives, which would allow you to navigate better. Because obviously we have a ceiling now, so we can't look into the model from above, so you need to have some kind of preset views. That will allow you to create better renderings because you can define the field of view with which you can design achieve that kind of realistic viewpoint when you set up, for instance, the camera height to a realistic value and the field of view to a very natural field. So that's one thing what I think has a very large influence on how the renders look like.
And then of course you can save these into certain views. Now I encourage everyone that after starting up the project, setting up the perspective views, name them. Do not keep this default name set as we have now here. And if you would like to name any of your views, then it's very simple to do. You just double click on the name and you say this is view 1, but it's from door or something like that.
Yes,
so
that way you can navigate better. That's right.
Keep them named because sooner or later you will realize that it's very difficult to find a view if you have a bunch of views only with numbering.
That's right.
And if you would like to work together with someone, like you would like to send your projects to me or to work together with other colleagues, it just simply makes the workflow easier. And when you would like to use the rendering, as you will see, it's also meaningful to name your views.
That's great. So let's look at the first big topic what we have to cover, working with lights. So lights are a very decisive factor, even though we see the lighting elements on this model, but we don't see anything from them. So we don't know if they are turned on. Still, they are a very important part of the project. So let's talk about them.
Yes, actually, the lighting elements that you refer to, we call them as lamps. And the definition of a lamp in ARCHLine is it's an object with at least one light source. And it's important. You can turn an object into a light source, but you cannot turn into a lamp, but you cannot turn a ceiling into a lamp. You need to have a host like in real life that hosts the light source, and that's the lamp. It can be tiny, it can be invisible, but you always need to have an object that you will use. And I think it's a very realistic approach, because once you have something like I have this here, this is an object that I can find. We already covered how you can place wall lamps on the very first workshop, I believe, the very first webinar. We used the Room Maker to place wall lamps. And we also show how you can distribute spotlights to the ceiling. But now I would like to show you how you can do the same thing on the 3D layout. But first thing first, let's see how this interior looks like if I create a render. In ARCHLine, when you do the rendering, there is a very, very useful thing, and it's called the real-time draft rendering. There's two ways you can do that. I will use this first option, I mean this standalone rendering real-time draft. And when I do that, the software actually describes what I will describe to you now, is that you should set up the size of the image that you're about to render. You should set up the quality, which is already set because we have chosen real-time draft. You should set up what sort of light sources you would like to see. You can enable and disable artificial lights, enable and disable sunlight, and so on. And you can also set up a background, which when you look out from this interior, that's the thing that you will see. And of course, if you do architectural renderings, this is the image or panorama that appears behind your building. And you can also adjust the background brightness. Now, let's say I'm happy with these settings, so let's see what I get for this setting here. Now, keep that in mind that rendering is very much CPU intensive.
Yes.
That's why actually now for this webinar we actually use another computer. We reach out to another computer to use it.
Otherwise the stream wouldn't be consistent. So
yeah, as you perhaps remember previously when we did it on the same computer, sometimes it broke the connection, and that's I think describing how much it uses the computer. It will use the full power of your computer if it can. So now when I'm using this real-time rendering, I can see that there are light sources. Some of them are turned on, some of them aren't turned off. Even there are screens, which I will talk about. There is this lamp on the wall, and it is not turned on. If I would like to turn it on, I need to select it, and I need to go to the object and see the light sources and check whether it's on. By default, when you place a lamp on a wall, it will be turned on, but you can, the same way you can decide to turn them on or off. And when you go back to the rendering, and that's why we call it real time.
Yes, it's good that updates every time you make any kind of change on your model.
Yes, that's right. So if you design visual effects on your drawing, lamps, how they affect your interior, this is a very useful tool. Sometimes I put this render to another screen, which I don't do now because in that case you wouldn't see. But it's also useful. This standalone renderer is useful when you have a second monitor, and then you can put that renderer to another monitor. You can work on the first monitor. You can make changes, and then it will get automatically updated in the render view. So now, when I go to the interior and I select lighting, and I go to place lamp, and I select a lamp. Let's select something from the. I think a wall lamp will do, and I think what we use is something like this. So I will go with this one or any of those. The thing that I'm selecting here is I can be sure that it's a lamp because it has this little tiny bulb symbol.
So it shows that it has a light source.
That means it has a light source. And then when I select the wall surface and I place it, then it appears here. And then now, if it has a light source, then it will also light up the scene as well.
Now, what about natural light?
The natural light is the sunlight, and then now let me just check whether we have the sunlight enabled. Now we don't have it, so if I enable the light source, the lamp, I mean the sunlight,
it updates
then
automatically.
see, yes, now it's turned on. Setting up the lamp, setting up the sunlight is actually very simple. Now for a while I'm turning this off because we don't want to see that, but here I would like to show you how that works. If I'm going to select an external view, which is, I believe, somewhere here, yeah, like this, then there is this tool in view, and I can use this shadow simulation, which when I'm clicking on it, enables the sunlight automatically, and then I can change the date, and I can change the time when I would like to see this light casting into the interior. See, sometimes I do this on the full model because I have objects that are important, how they affect the interior. But sometimes I disable parts, which I will show you soon. So I'm going back to some other setting like this here. And then when I hit OK, it automatically disappears. So it's there only while I'm setting up the shadow. But if I would like to keep it, right? Yeah, yes. Despite it's not visible now, it really depends on the rendering settings. If I turn on sunlights, then I will see sunlights in rendering, even despite I'm not seeing it here happening. And also, if I would like to, for example, for client representation or for anything else, I would like to see the shadows here. I can click here and I can turn on shadows, like sort of
so by default it's switched off because you don't need that all the time.
Yes. So now I'm going back to this view, and let's focus on this same part first. And then talking about filtering. Now, as you can see, we see all sort of details, also the furniture and things like that. So I think this is when we can also talk about how you can organize, how you can optimize your model for rendering. Now, for example, now I'm about to focus on materials, lights and things like that, so I don't need many things here. So I'm going back to my 2D and I check and I turn off layers of things that I don't want to see. I'm not sure how familiar you are of handling layers.
Well, even though we are going to explain that next Tuesday, maybe a couple of words.
Yes, at least some tiny information here. Here is where you can manage your layers. All your layers are managed in a fashion when ARCHLine places walls onto a layer called walls, slabs onto a layer called slabs, and roofs and railings and so on. But you can create your own layers, and we really recommend you to do so. If you have a shop interior, if you have a living room, if you have a kitchen, if you have an apartment with rooms, we recommend you to create at least one layer for the furnishing, one layer for the lights. Now it's separated for several other layers, but you should have at least one for the lights. And there should be one another for decoration. Now when we talk about decoration, those are the tiny decorative items like, you know, a pen or a mug or something like that. It's really there for decoration representative purposes, but not necessarily important for all the time when you just design the furniture material or something like that. So if you have this model in front of you, and then you have these layers, which you will always have, it's just depending on you how you organize the content, because you can select something and you can put in another layer by simply selecting another layer here. So once you have that, you can use the layer walk. That's something that I like to use a lot, because this allows me to disable the decorative items. For example, I don't want to see any of these now. And when I click OK, and then I hit the 3D hammer, which rebuilds, refreshes the 3D, then now some of these things will just simply disappear because they were on layers that I'm not interested in.
There's one interesting thing I learned while learning how the rendering engine works and what's the rationality behind it. When you're doing a rendering and you look at a certain space within your 3D model, even if there are things which are behind you, which are outside of the rendering boundaries, they are also going to be rendered. So, because the software needs to make sure that those things which you can see have any kind of effect on what you actually see. So in order to avoid those things being calculated needlessly, you can put them on another layer, you can disable them. That's one thing that you taught me in the beginning.
Yes.
The other thing is that when you're doing rendering, you always have to focus on the larger textures first.
Yeah.
In this case, it would be the ceiling, the wall, or the floor. And another thing here is that always focus on those things which are in focus, actually. So if that would be some kind of central object in this, maybe a desk or anything, then that's the thing, but you have to figure out after the large surfaces. So everything else, move to another layer, disable, and then you can work with these larger surfaces.
Yes, and one another thing, and it actually comes before rendering. Even when you set up the perspectives, there is one good advice, or several of them. One is that keep the horizontal eye level. I mean, when you set up the perspective, you should have the same camera and target Z. That will give you a nice, clean horizontal shot, and that will be something that your clients will understand much more easily than having an angled shot, which is sometimes it's meanvertical, but you should avoid it as if you can, because sometimes it's just it's giving vertical edges a slope. They will be slanted, and then it's just giving some clients, they won't feel comfortable watching your image if you have that. So yeah.
Returning back to lamps. One thing, I'm not sure if you want to show the lamp import right now, or you want to show it in another.
I will show that, but before I do that, I would like to also hide this part to show you one another thing, and that's the render frame. Mm-hmm. Now, if you render an image, before rendering, you can tell that this is the area what will be rendered, but you cannot tell exactly where the image will end. I mean, I'm not sure if this will be a visible part of my rendering or not, because this really depends on the resolution.
Which might not necessarily be the same as what you see right now.
Yes, because I can have an extremely widescreen monitor and I can see more than what I will render. So for that purpose, you will have something like this option here in rendering. You have this render frame on or off, and this turns on the frame, and this will tell you exactly what you will render. So even when you set up your perspectives, this is a very useful thing, because then you can see and you can exclude things that you don't want to see, and you can include things that you want to see on your render. So sometimes it's meaningful to refine views even when you have more detail in your view. In the same way, you can turn it off at any time. Mm-hmm. So going back to lamps, if I would like to work with lamps, now there are the lamps that are coming with the software, but when I'm downloading something from an online warehouse, for example 3D warehouse, we will use that now, then I can do that several ways. First things first, I should look for, I think it was some concrete lamp that we would like to find now, and it's a pendant lamp. Perhaps we will need to refine. Well, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. This we used a lot before, and it's a nice model. The point here is that, see, this object is coming with the name concrete ceiling lamp. And even though those objects on 3D Warehouse, they are not hosted with light sources, the software is trying to figure out whether this is a lamp or it's something else. And if it finds that this is a lamp, and it's very simple, it contains the string lamp or light or chandelier or something like that, then the software will assume that this is a lamp. So when I place it here, it will already come with a light source, and I can tell that because, see, whenever you select something with a light source, it comes with at least one light bulb. If I click here, it also comes with a light bulb. And where is that light source? That light source is actually at the bottom point of this whole thing. So I need to actually elevate this. Let's just elevate it graphically up to the ceiling like this and see what happens. Now this object has a light source at the bottom.
But how many light sources does it have? Because it has 4 lamps, but how many light sources we have here?
When you download something from online, it will always have only one light source. The software cannot tell whether this is a lamp with 4 or 5 or 6 pieces of sources. It will just assume that this is a light source, so it should have at least one, and it doesn't even know where it should be because there's no information about this in this object. So what will happen here? I will just right click here, and see there is this lighting option here, and I can add and edit light sources. So if I already have one light source, which is this tiny dot here, I can move it someplace else. So let's say I'm happy with this light source, but I just would like to move it someplace else. Make sure that you also check it at least from two views where your light source is, because this is only the frontal view, so I'm not sure if from the side it's at the proper position. So I will go with, let's say this is a front view, okay, and let's go with the right view.
Yeah,
see,
it's actually there, but it could be misleading. Now you are lucky. So how do you add another copy of this light source 3 additional times?
Well, if I would like to add another one, then I can just click on add, and I can select a light source. I can even go with my project light sources if I already use one. So I just select this one, okay, and then it's added again to the center. I can move it, and I can repeat this 4 times. And so I will have 4 separate light sources. And then when I hit OK.
After that, I assume you can save this lamp into your library back, so it would have 4 light sources.
Yes. There is an option. If you right-click here, not only editing and all sort of other things are supported, but yes, you can also save it. You can update that lamp in your library if you want. And then if I go back to the rendering,
I think it was a draft.
Yes. I think I will go with that one, and I don't enable sunlight. We already discussed that part. So I go back to rendering.
So now 2 of those 4 need to be on.
Yes, and it is in effect. So it really depends on your choice of how many light sources you add. Sometimes, and this could be a trick, you don't even have to add the same amount of light sources that you really have, because keep that in mind. When you have a light source, ray tracing will track that light source. If you have 2 light sources, ray tracing will track those 2 light sources, and then when you count up the light sources, the ray tracer will have to deal with more light sources, and that takes a longer rendering time. So if you would like to conserve rendering time, you would like to make it shorter, just as my colleague told, first things first, you will turn off all the light sources, all the lamps that are in other rooms, because you don't want to waste time calculating the zero. And then also you should focus on things like this. If you don't have a powerful computer, then you can render with that, but you should be more aware of the number of light sources that you have. And light sources are coming in several forms. Like there is light source that I just designed. It's a simple light source. We call it a spherical or point light source, which is the simplest. It's easy to calculate for the renderer. But there are linear light sources, which I will design now.
We'll look at them in a minute.
Which is a little bit more difficult to calculate, but it's also more pretty in many situations.
That's right. Let's talk about now lamp distribution, because that's something that we have briefly touched upon. But if you look at the ceiling, we see that there are a lot of spotlights over there. So
yes.
How do we go about creating a grid, what we can see up here?
Yes, first things first, if I would like to see what's happening with these lamps, let me just turn this back on. I would like to check whether the lamps of this ceiling are turned on, and they are actually turned off. So let me just enable them. So now the software regenerates the whole thing, and it is trying to pass this information to the renderer, which happened nicely. So I will select another view. Let's just go to another view. I just get rid of the selection. Let's just go to this. I think this will work because there is an empty space here for the distribution. And I go to the details of this ceiling. And there's actually 2 things that I'm about to show you. One thing is that if I click here, this is a distribution. I just alt-click on the light sources. Well, actually, I have them here. See, there is this 1, 2, 3 light distribution. These 3, I can cycle.
So these are actually paths along which the light sources are distributed.
Yes, I can actually design a path that now it's a vertical base profile. It's called a vertical base profile, and along that vertical base profile there is a series of lamps, which I can again go into the details, and I can set up how many lamps I would like to see. And also, and this is the other thing that I would like to show you, you can set up the cut out of this plain ceiling, and now I will make it larger for visual purposes, so we can see it much easier. See, now it's twice as large as before, so now we can see it's an effect. Now I can just change it back to the proper size, so it will surround.
But you can define a customized profile as well, right?
Yes.
So
yes. Here you can go to the profile libraries. You can even draw your own profile, or you can just simply go there and customize and change. It actually works the same way. If you remember how we designed the shape of the furniture,
yes.
That's coming with the same settings. So you can always design the layout of these things, even if they are not saved yet on your computer.
Right. And also this red path, you can see you can have another more unique path, for instance, an arc maybe, or some kind of spline form.
Yes, and the same way I added this here, you can add another one, and then it will actually, by default, it will copy the settings of the previous one. But if I move it, I don't know, half a meter from the left-hand side, see now it's appearing there, and when I click create, now the software will mimic the previous settings, and then I can customize that as well.
Yeah, so this is a nice addition to what we covered the first time, and on the bathroom webinar when we made the matrix distribution of these spotlights.
Yeah. And now I should see the changes appearing here.
Definitely.
Sometimes, and I think it's important now, the real-time rendering is working hard to keep track of the changes. If for any reason it loses connection, which happens sometimes, mostly I see it happening on less powerful computers. If that happens, you can either restart the rendering and force it to re-render the whole scene. But if it's not working, then don't mind, just close it and restart rendering again, and it will always work. It will always resynchronize the changes, and you will see the latest updates, the latest changes.
You briefly mentioned these linear lighting elements, so maybe we could talk a couple of regarding the decorative light elements. So what kind of features do we have in this regard?
Well, actually, now I will draw a linear light. I believe I will turn on one of the furniture sets, because there is a nice desk, and below that desk I would like to create an LED strip. And for that reason I'm going back to the 2D, and here on the 2D drawing I'm going back to use this here, and I think I will turn on the furnishing, and there is one already with the LED strip, and it's over there, so we will see that how it looks like, and then I will erase it and draw another
You might
one.
need to rebuild the 3D in order to show the changes.
Yes, so now we don't see it automatically, but after I change the 2D, when I click on 3D and it updates the changes, then I can see how it looks like. I only need to select another view, which I believe this will work.
To have a better view at that column-like podium thingy.
Yeah. So let's see how it looks like in the rendering. Yeah, this is how it goes. That's it, which I'm talking about. And here I will create another one. So under this one, zooming in, I'm using the interior lighting, and there is a dedicated tool for LED light strips. So I will just start, for example, let's just start on the edge, and I will add an arc. So I just try to cover this part, and again with another arc I will create a closed loop around here, and like that. And then when I'm finished drawing the path of this LED strip and I hit enter, the software will create this loop, and I'm about to select and set the intensity. I can even disable lights later on the same way as I did with the ceiling. I can change the dimming level, so keeping the same intensity, I can dim the light source, or I can multiply the power of the light source. And I can also change the color. I think I will go with something nice orange-like. And again, here I can change the cross-section profile. This is a rectangular cross-section profile, but again, I can go to the libraries and even design my own and use that.
So it's a standard sweep command. It works with the same with the decorative elements or the pipes that you want to put in. You have to define the path and you define a cross-section.
Yeah, if you actually saw one of our decoration videos, that's the same thing. It works in a quite similar fashion. And then also, again, you can set up how it will look like when you disable the light sources. In that case, it will look like a chrome surface if I keep this material setting here. And on the last page, it's important you can set up how it elevates from the floor. And I believe in this case, I have 120 millimeters. I'm in meters now, so I should use this value, and I click OK, and then now it appears over there. And as it is an object that I have just created, I can change its path, I can change its settings, I can, whenever I want, I can go back to the settings, change any sort of details. And because it was an LED strip, we should see it happening in the 3D space, and now it brights up this
What
scene.
other uses we have for decorative lighting?
For example, there is the brand new Luminous Text tool, and it allows you to, I will place a Luminous Text here. And for that reason, I think I will also turn on the layer for the Luminous Text, because we actually already have a few of them.
We have a few already placed. Again, rebuilding the 3D.
Yeah.
It is actually a better solution for slower computers, because it doesn't have to rebuild it automatically. You just have to decide when you want to, to have that happen. As we saw before, these are not luminous right now, because that you can only see in rendering. But these are the 3D text elements which actually light up if you enable this feature.
So if I would like to add the 3D text, the luminous text here, I can again use the interior lighting, and there's this luminous text tool. And I use the same text here at the right bottom corner. I have this design shop name, and it's called eDesign. And let's go with that one, okay. And I select the surface. I select the origin of the text, and I can select the orientation of the text. And then this little designer comes up where I can decide the extrusion, that's actually the depth or the height of this text.
Text style maybe.
And then you can set up the text style, you can even change the text later on. And here is the place where you can set up how it will look like when the whole thing is turned off. That's the cherry material which will appear when the lights are disabled, which are now disabled. So if I enable this lighting and I set up the intensity, let's just make it a bit brighter. And I will change the color matching the original color, something red. And then when I click OK, and it appears here, and it appears also in the rendering, and see the cast light here, it tells me that it's really bright enough.
Perfect. So I think now we have enough light sources and enough elements to go about rendering. But maybe there's a couple of things we can say about preparing the model for rendering, or something before that.
And about lighting, I don't want to forget to talk about that now. What we used are standard light source types, but also you can bring in and you can use light sources from manufacturers, and I think it's an important thing. If you go to the light source libraries and you go to global light sources, you will find a library called IES. It's an acronym for the lighting standards, and these are information collected in laboratories from makers, from the manufacturers, from GE, from Philips, and all other makers around the world. They from time to time, when they generate a new luminous source, they just bring them into the laboratory, and they literally scan the power of these lamps, and these data are stored in IES files, which you can go and find on their website mostly freely, and you can download them, and you can, using this little cogwheel here, you can import those light sources. And as you can see, these light sources are having a lot of interesting feature in their we call them light source profile, and the way they cast lights on the surfaces will just bring in some nice detail that you will really like.
It's more lifelike, right?
More realistic, yes.
Perfect. So how about talking about how to prepare the model for rendering? Because I think that's a very important issue, to know how to set it up to get the correct results, because it obviously starts with the work you do before you do the actual rendering.
Yes, one thing that we covered is that you should always focus on what's most important. You should clean the model and focus on surfaces, add more detail, focus on those details, add more detail and focus on those details, and gradually you get to a point when you will have everything that you want to see. But this way, focusing the most important and then the less important things is a good workflow, because rendering is using a lot of time, and you don't want to wait for all the features all along. Even if you have the draft rendering, which is a very nice feature, but it's being slow when you have too many details. And talking about how to prepare your model, you should prepare the lights, as we mentioned. You should prepare your model, having everything that you want, and skip everything that you don't want to see. And another thing is the materials. We did not cover that yet. And materials are an important part of your model. They're all around, you will see all of those. And if you would like to set up the floor, for example, as you can see, it's a little bit reflective, and it's also a little bit reflective on the floor, but it's because of the material settings. Now, ARCHLine comes with built-in materials. It comes with built-in white ceiling, bright white wall, a parquet, and so on. But let me just quickly just show you how you can find and how you can change materials. Like, for example, there's this floor surface. I right-click there, and I select Find Material. And this is what you will see for a material. You can set up a pattern, which we covered partially also at the first webinar, how you can bring in patterns and how you can build your own material. And once you have your own material, you can change all these settings. You can change let's just change the transparency, which is not meaningful for a floor, but you will see that it will be right away. In effect, you will see, now it's not that much transparent, but you will see how it changes the rendering during you change the settings of that material. If you change it back, make it less transparent and change the reflectivity, refraction, and all sorts of other details, you can find the best solution.
And you have instant visual feedback on the
you will always have that instant feedback. And even if you bring in the smallest details, like I'm doing now, I'm going back to the 2D, and I'm selecting this here, and let's say I would like to add the switches and sockets and also the decoration, and rebuild the 3D. Let's just rebuild the whole 3D. Then I can decide which detail I will work with. Sometimes I won't work with small details, like there's a pen which I just place there, but I don't care about its reflectivity because I don't make close shots. It's just a decorative item. But I will focus on the walls, I will focus on the furniture, I will focus on the most important things. And then when I go back to the view that I'm about to render, like for example from here, I will see them happening all around. Yes. Those materials over there, those are also light sources. That's a very special material type that you can set up. See, if I right click here and I find that material, say find material, then it will tell me that that's a material which is a real emissive material with an intensity, and that's why it's brighten up the scene. It's literally a light source. So you can have a light source even made out of a material. That's one specialty. Other than that, you can use wood, porcelain, parquet, mirror, and all sorts of other materials. And if you can't find something, like you can't find plastic over there, or you will find materials that are not there, you will able to use the general material.
So that's the all-purpose setup. That's
the all-purpose, like Jolly Joker material that you can use for everything.
Any other tips you can give us at this point before we actually do the rendering?
I think now we can start rendering.
So let's talk about the fundamentals of rendering. So one thing that you already told a few times that it's very heavy on the CPU.
Yeah.
So that's basically the only thing what it's going to use, right? Because the way it works is that it calculates every single pixel to determine how that particular part of the drawing is going to look like.
Yes. And at the end, when I'm finished with this, I will just simply go back to the renderer. I will open it up, and then I will say that, okay, now I'm fine with this, and I go to the details. I don't even have to close this. I go to the details and I say, okay, let's move on and render something with an interior setting. And then the software will render the whole scene. Everything will be the same, just the quality will be much better. And while it's rendering, I can go to the effects and I can change the exposure, because here this image looks a bit underexposed. So I need to increase the exposure until a point where I'm satisfied with the result, and I say, okay, whites are white enough and I don't have too much washed out surfaces. Now I actually have too much, so let's just dial it down. But the thing that I'm about to highlight here is that first you should set up the exposure and then all the rest. If you change the contrast down or above, you can test whether you like it or not, and if you don't like it, you can go back to the default setting by just simply clicking on this option. You can do the same with the saturation. You can oversaturate it, you can desaturate it, and you can go back to the default by clicking on this icon. You can change the shadows, midtones, highlights. You can do this all during rendering as well, and then you can just leave the computer, okay, do your stuff, render, and then when it's finished, then you can save the image in several file formats. Now you will always send your image as a JPEG file, but I recommend you to save your image not just in a JPEG file, but perhaps at least in a PNG, because there's a difference between the two. The JPEG is not a lossless conversion. It will lose some of the information, but don't get afraid of that. It will still have a good quality. But if you would like to use this image for other purposes in the future, when you would like to professionally edit it or something like that, it's always worth at least having a PNG version of it, because it's not losing information when you save it.
How are exterior renders different?
Exterior renders are different in, for example, the exposure setting. In case of exteriors, the exterior scenes are very well exposed to the sunlight, so they get a lot of sunlight. And if you change the exposure from the default, which is not calculated, it's always 330. So if you just move it above that, usually you will end up with burnt visuals, and you don't want that. So sometimes, or many times, when you have a lot of directly lit surfaces of exterior designs, you will actually dial down this exposure below the default setting. That's one difference, and another difference is that the reflective surfaces are becoming more and more important in the exterior renders. And actually, which I did not mention, we have a video about that. The ARCHLine also supports Fresnel surfaces and real reflective surfaces all around us. There's nearly no non-reflective surface. There's nearly no material that we can really say that that's a matte surface. And most of the surfaces around us, even our skin, is reflective. And all these settings you can set up in the rendering settings to have a great plastic, have a good wooden surface, or have a good rubber surface or plastic surface. These you can set up, or you can just simply pick one existing material as a sample from our sample projects or from the software libraries, and then just use it as a basis and play with it. Because really, with the real-time rendering, you can tweak and you can see the changes in real time, and then you can react to that.
Perfect. But I think this is about to be done, right?
Yes. It's just finishing the rendering. But what I meant about final rendering is that now, as you remember, the real-time render was grainy, and it will always be grainy because it won't ever finish. It will stop after a while, and it will just show you a result. So that's not something that you will send ever to your clients. But this here, it's not grainy. It has clean surfaces, and it's also because it has a lot of light sources in it. If I would have only one single light source and then it emits its lights, then I perhaps will have to increase this rendering quality to high detail render. But let me show you one surprising thing, and it's this here. I can use the exterior render for interiors as well. Yes, because it's named exterior, but it's not only for exteriors. The difference between these settings is the time considered for rendering. So if I go with real time, it's this short, only seconds, and the render must finish. If I tell that, okay, render it with exterior, then I say that this scene has enough light source to finish in short time. So don't take that long, render it fast, and give me a clean result in shorter time. And as you see, I don't remember what was the previous rendering time, but it was several minutes.
Approximately 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, and as you can see, it will finish. It will definitely finish earlier, and I will still have the same clean interior scene. So it's just a generic rule that if you have a nice bright scene, go with the lowest setting, you will very likely have a good result. But if you have graininess somewhere appearing here or appearing around these surfaces, then increase the rendering setting, and then you will get a better, smoother result.
While this finishes, we have prepared a slideshow on some of our reference images when it comes to rendering. I'm going to narrate what's going on, so let's fire this up and let's see what this does. Okay, so we have a couple of architectural and interior design projects here. One thing to point out is that our software does have an integrated rendering engine, but it also connects to third-party rendering software products such as Lumion, ArcLentis, 3ds Max, Cinema 4D. So if you already have any of these products, you can export the ARCHLine project file into a compatible format, read into this software, and finish the job over there. This image, for instance, was done with a third-party render, right?
Yes, yes. It's a mixture of interior and exterior renders.
That's right. So some of them were done in ARCHLine. Bottom line is, if you already have a software product you are convenient and comfortable with, use that for your purposes. But if you don't have that, that's not a problem. You can learn the basics and the tricks and tips of rendering from within ARCHLine.
And I think a good example of a good comparison of what's the difference between the integral render, what we have here, and what's the difference between the between third-party renders is like what I have. I have a phone in my pocket. It makes good images. I don't have to set up many settings. I just set up a few, and it does the job. I have nice images. But if I buy a DSLR, it comes with more settings, and I actually have to set up those settings, but I will also get a different result.
Yeah, so it depends on what you actually need. I have a lot of customers who use ARCHLine to just get a glimpse at how the final render looks like, and then they just grab the model and push it into another render. But then again, there are a lot of you who use ARCHLine for rendering and
exclusively, and they have realistic results as well. So the quality itself not necessarily depends on the render itself. The settings that you can get with the render, it's depending on the solution mostly.
That's
right. One important thing which comes up from time to time, and I think sooner or later it will come as a question as well, and it's GPU rendering. Now GPU rendering is a buzzword. It happens a lot around, but it's still a VIP feature for renderers, and it's not included in this renderer yet. It's our renderer, which comes from a French company called Redway, supports CPU rendering, so it uses your CPU and the RAM. And if you would like to use GPU rendering, there are third-party renderers for that. Well, for example, Lumion is a great tool for that.
Yes. So these are the closing remarks. Actually, that concludes our fourth and penultimate show of the Interior Design webinar series. Join us next Tuesday when we look at a not so spectacular but no less useful show, which is going to be about documentation, wall views, elevations, quantity takeoffs,
and even mood board.
That's right. That's right. The mood boards are very, very, very great in this regard. You can check it out next Tuesday, same time, 3 p.m. Central European time. I'm expecting you all to be there. See you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.